What is up, Babylonians? Dan was here, and today we're going to be talking about the latest dev news Thursday, and it's mostly about Moaning Winds. And no, I don't mean the other content creators out there who are moaning about the supposed debuffs or nerfs that are coming to the mods. Let's get into it. So first of all, we'll jump into the general news that they have released. So they've mentioned that they're in a similar position to last week with releasing the patch. So currently it's going into the submission process. So that would be going to Steam, going to Xbox, going to PlayStation, going to Stadia. And it's just being held up at the moment by their process where they have to obviously check that the update is going to be safe for the consoles. It's going to contain what they say it does and hasn't got anything that I guess is above the current rating of the game. Just making sure it's safe and working, really. So they want to take the opportunity in this dev news to actually talk about Outriders in general. So quite often they see players asking, what is the point and why are you running Outriders in such a live service way? And usually in a combination with a really spicy hot take along the lines of dead game, which you'll see in any Outriders post that they bring up. The first comment will most likely be little Jimmy there that's been waiting for hours, watching that Twitter feed, waiting for them to post so that they can be the first one to say dead game. So check out the Twitter, you'll probably see that in the post, to be honest. This is also the case for any content creators that post about it as well. You'll have little Jimmy waiting there to post that exact same thing again. So they are clearly aware of that, and they are definitely not thinking that this game is a dead game. So they're going to say, so when each patch or change is viewed at in isolation, it is somewhat understandable where these feelings come from. So like I say, they are aware that people are upset about the game. I'd like to say it's a select few, but there is quite a few people that are saying dead game, and obviously it has dropped from, I think, the heights of 100k plus players, concurrent players, down to, I think we're about 3,000 concurrent players or so now. But obviously that's concurrent, so you will see probably a few more thousand that do play it throughout the day. I myself will play it mostly on stream night, but obviously we do play it for a couple of hours every other day or so, just to try and get some of the extra content, like the builds and whatnot for you guys. That is the same obviously with Songs of Rays as well. So everything that they are doing with these patches at the moment, and everything that they are developing, and will continue to do so in the future. So like they're saying there that it's definitely not a dead game, because they are going to continue in the future as well. This is not just a let's get something out there now, try and appease people and stop there. They are looking to the future. So it will contribute in its own way to creating the outright experience that you have all been asking for. So for me, what does that say? Well, for me, that makes me think that they are looking at our comments, they are looking at what the community is actually shouting about, and some of you are talking nicely. But I think what they're doing with that is they are looking at your comments, seeing what content that you are actually looking and waiting for, and that is what they are working on. So you want transmog, I can guarantee you they have heard that, and that's probably on their minds. Can't guarantee they're working on it, but it's in their minds. They're probably going to look into something to appease people who are after that. Same with new content, new expeditions, or a new mode. I can guarantee they have heard that, and they are looking into seeing what they can do. So they go on to say all the patch and rebalancing work that we have undertaken to date are a part of a much bigger plan and an end goal. An end goal that does very much include Stadia. So all you Stadia players, you are still being thought of, and they are working towards getting you in line and in line with consoles and PC, and getting you working just as well. So everything we're currently doing and have done in the past is essentially laying down the foundation of what is still to come for Outriders. while also letting you be a part of this journey. So again, that says to me they are listening to you and they're going to do everything they can to actually create the game as almost as you want it to be, as the community, whoever shouts loudest, I guess, how they want it to be. So they are looking into your feedback and trying to get stuff to actually make you happy. So this is also why it's important for us to get these patches right, i.e. why they are taking time to release them, because they want them to actually work and not break anything else. So those of you who are shouting and are upset that an update hasn't come today, you're probably going to get a much better experience because of that, because it's going to come out a week later. They've had the extra time to work on it, and it's going to, if it goes through the testing phases or it goes through the submission process and it's found to actually break something, then rather than having it out there and broken, it's going to get fixed before it actually does go out. So the ones to make sure the patches are right and also bring the players the meta and the overall state of the game is the best place it possibly can before we introduce what's next, so the next content. So they're trying to get it to a state in which people are not going to be, obviously you'll always get people who will, but trying to get it so people won't be complaining about the game. So I think, to be honest, I'm happy with that. I'm happy that they're taking time to get the content to actually work, trying to get it to not have anything that's broken in there before they release what's next. So for me, I'm perfectly happy with that. So I do look forward to the new content. I am on the edge of my seat waiting for the announcement, which I'm sure will come soon enough. But for now, I'm happy that they are making the game stable. Now, if we go into the next topic for discussion, which is a deep dive into Moaning Winds. So they have gone in to say, as part of today's news and to continue last week's discussion, we want to spend a bit of time going into the case study of Moaning Winds. Before we get into it, it's worth stating that we primarily balanced Outriders towards a 3-player co-op experience. That means that mods should be the most balanced when played in co-op. But for that, some mods, their behaviour and unique mechanics can lead to them being more or less powerful in single player. Prior to launch, Moaning Winds was balanced to be a niche mod. Initially, it's, at the time, super low damage value, 97k-ish at level 50, Origin Point, the player, and Trigger, the reload, were making this mod obsolete. The judgment was made on many hours of playtests and comparing throughput of different builds and skill levels, all in heavy tempo meta. In a 3-player co-op session, there were very few enemies approaching a single player at once, let alone in that player's direct area of influence, so close distance to the player. This made the mod quite niche, especially within a multiplayer session. Since changing the trigger on reload or Origin Point player was not an option, we chose to turn a bland, non-competing mod into a powerful niche tool that could serve one specific purpose: to clear trash mobs that attempt to overwhelm the player through sheer numbers. We achieved this through upping the damage and the cooldown, both 4 times. Damage was increased to make the mod be able to serve the desired niche, whilst the cooldown change was made to safeguard the mod from abuse play patterns, such as triggering the mod every 1 or 2 shots. So they actually increased the cooldown on that from 2 to 8 seconds to try and prevent any abuse, which obviously, as we can clearly tell, that hasn't really helped, because you can put it on 3 weapons and you can pop it off on one, pop it off on the next, pop it off on the third, and by which time you are almost reset that cooldown once you have then, with a Pyromancer for example, gone through your heat wave, your ash blast, your overheat. You're then pretty much back, ready to go to complete and restart the cycle again. So we achieved. Sorry, I've read that bit. This solution held true for 3-player co-op. So testing and with Moaning Winds could obliterate swarming melee enemies and chunk elite opponents. This mod, when played proactively, achieved viability, competing with other S-tier mods such as Legendary Minefield, Ultimate Bone Shrapnel, Wrath of Moloch, Ravenous Locust, Sandstorm, and a few others. So what they found with that was when playing in co-op, it was actually quite a viable mod to use the way that they intended, and it was on par with those other mods, plus obviously some others as well. However, in an environment where health of enemies is greatly reduced, so in single player, the damage Moaning Winds brought is, or was, overpowering. Not only trash enemies, but also elites were nearly or fully killed thanks to the mod. When used with a series of combat damage amplifiers buffing anomaly damage, that was usually the case. So if you buff your anomaly damage, then you're going to deal a hell of a lot of damage. They're going to say, however, its 8-second cooldown still prevented this mod from being entirely abusable. So they didn't intend you to use it on three weapons, hence why it wasn't seen as abusable at that time. With that in mind, the single-player Moaning Winds experience wasn't considered a huge problem. If a player invested the time into farming, understanding the game, and how different stats and mods can be complemented in order to create an incredibly OP build, they could naturally create a Moaning Winds build that was viable in some, but not all, situations. However, what we did not account for was the dominance of single-player experience combined with the nature of cooldown resetting on mods. The problem of cooldown resetting being that the same mod on different weapons might not share a single global cooldown, making it possible for such mods to be triple spammed. So this is where the unseen abuse comes in. Cooldown resetting is something we looked at and addressed on a number of mods prior to launch, including status applying bullet mods, so vulnerable, freezing, etc. Before this, tested could otherwise proc the 8-second cooldown mod, swap to a new weapon and apply the same mod again. The net gain of such play was estimated as generally taking 5 seconds off a mod's effective cooldown. So that would, I believe, be if you did that per weapon that's taking off the 5 seconds. So if you've got it on 3 weapons, you are, like I say, nearly removing the cooldown entirely. It's worth noting that we became aware of the risk that cooldown resetting prevented a short while before launch. The time constraint here meant that we had to respond on a mod by mod level, rather than overhauling the entire cooldown system. The cooldown resetting fix specifically for those status applying mods was implemented prior to release. However, the potential for abuse remained as a sleeper issue, and a few other mods, most prevalent of all being Moaning Winds, and that's how we have arrived at today. So they've asked, where do we go from here? So they are saying it'd be good to remind ourselves of a few things. We do not plan to address the issue of Moaning Winds, and they're going to say, or Fortress as well, because that was a part of last week's news, before we have resolved the challenges that drove the creation of this meta and that continue to require its viability. Moaning Winds' core issue is not the base damage of the mod itself, and so we want to avoid fixing an issue that is not present on playstyles that do not involve quick cycling or shuffling weapons. So with this, basically what they are saying is that they don't want to sort of stop the playstyle of being able to quick cycle or shuffling weapons. They know it's something that is here, and by the looks of it, it's here to stay. They're not going to, from what I can tell here, they're not going to set it so you can only use one mod per weapon and have no effect from the second, or change it as like a global cooldown, because they feel like that would actually ruin the game for a lot of people, because that is obviously the current meta that is in the game, and that is what everyone is currently used to using as well. So they're going to say they have always had the option of simple numbers nerfing in this case, so reducing the damage, increasing the cooldown, but they have not done so. We are interested in giving players a choice of using the greatest possible amount of different mods in combination with one another, which in turn will lead to a much more compelling gameplay loops. For example, would it be healthy for players to be able to have 6 different mods on 3 weapons, rather than the same 2 mods on all 3 weapons? So this was a likely overly long deep dive into the history of Moaning Winds and how we're approaching the problem it presents, having spent some time observing and participating in community chat following last week's topic for discussion. It's great to see that a number of players are already thinking in the same direction that we are too, with regards to how the issue could be resolved. So it sounds like a lot of the community are coming up with ideas. I know I've heard things like maybe Moaning Winds shouldn't be on reload, so once you press that R button or square or X, whatever it's set to, to reload. It shouldn't activate then. Maybe it should activate once that magazine is being placed into the weapon and the mag has been refilled. That would be one way to slow it down somewhat, but keep it on all 3 weapons, allowing you to do the 3-way Moaning Winds on all the weapons. And I don't think it would make too much difference either, because you would probably get through each one probably a little bit slower, but you'd then get still being able to use Moaning Winds, the first one, again, pretty much once you've done the last one. And they've gone on to say that they will do a similar deep dive on Fortress in the coming weeks if we are interested, which I must say I am, as a part of which I will hopefully also be able to share the exact steps we're planning to take to resolve the Fortress dilemma in the future. So with this one, they've said that they didn't want it to be almost a staple mod on a weapon. They wanted it to be something that you could choose whether to have it or not, and still almost get the same experience depending on what mod you replace it with. So that'll be interesting to see what they're going to do with that in the future as well. Now, the next thing they go into is actually the patch notes, but I don't think there's much point in covering those. We covered those a couple of weeks back, and they're still the same. They're still waiting, like I say, the test cycle, and they have submitted it, so they're waiting for that to go through. So hopefully we'll see that possibly next week, but they've not said if it's going to come early next week, late next week, or even at all, but fingers crossed we'll see that soon. And we would like to know as well, what are your thoughts on the update today? Do you think that they are approaching it in the right way? Do you think they are going the wrong way of doing things? Do you think they should just leave Moaning Winds as it is and not bother touching it at all? Or do you think that it's good that they're looking to shift the meta a little bit to make more mods more viable, which in my opinion would make the game more fun, because you can try different things out, you can swap your mods around, and you can see which ones again are actually going to be faster for clearing out the end game? Or would you prefer they just forget about all this and just go straight into creating some new end game content for yourselves? Let us know in the comments below anyway, and if you liked the video, hit that thumbs up. If you hated it and hate us, thumbs down. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to us. And as always, enjoy.